Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone in the audience, depending on where you are joining us from. We are delighted to share some very timely content with you today as we discuss, are you really protecting your backup data? To lead you through these key technologies, I'm very pleased to introduce Chris Snell, Senior Solutions Architect at Cobalt Iron. Chris is a data protection specialist with expertise in storage, backup, disaster recovery, and virtualization spheres. Chris, the mic is yours.
Thank you, Mary. Hello, everybody, and thank you for attending today's session brought to you by Cobalt Iron and raising the question, are you really safeguarding your backup data? We want to raise awareness on 6 key features that you should be using in your backup environment to ensure you can recover when you need to. The plan today is to cover what we've identified as the 3 main threat pillars, discuss what technology you will need for a secure backup strategy, and finally, we'll take a look at how these technologies perform by reviewing a real-world customer attack case study and how they managed to recover using Compass, all because their data was secure. Ransomware breaches have increased by 13%, more than the last 5 years combined, according to a new report. The Verizon Business 2022 Data Breach Investigations Report reveals an unprecedented year in cybersecurity and details focal issues affecting the international cybersecurity landscape. In addition to the increase in ransomware breaches, it also found that 82% of cyber breaches involve the human element, including social attacks, errors, and misuse. The report also found that 62% of incidents in the system intrusion pattern involved threat actors compromising partners. Backups are, of course, your last line of defense to help get your systems back up and running again. And this means they have to be protected, and I mean fully protected. So why do these attacks happen, and how do they get access to your backups? Here we have the 3 threat pillars identified. The 3 top concerns regarding backup security are, first of all, hackers. Of course, backups are a #1 target because if hackers take out the backup, there's a stronger chance that they will see a payday. Secondly, expanding attack vectors related to the expanding complexity and the new risks within an increasingly distributed remote workforce. And finally, human error. Simple human error accounts for more vulnerabilities than we may realize. As an example, social engineering and unpatched software accounted for 90 to 95% of breaches for most companies. Let's take a look at the first threat pillar, hackers. Most of the vulnerable attack points exploited by hackers are flying under the radar for customers or are too challenging or too time-consuming to keep up with across the entire environment. If you're like many leaders we work with, your team is working hard to ensure the security of your organization, with the emphasis on hard, and the demands continue to increase, while budgets and human resources might not. You see the frequent attack points listed up on the slide. Some of these points might seem very obvious, but I bet there are some you think about less. Take the backup catalog, for example. Last year, I heard of not 1, but 2 organizations who were taken out by ransomware when backup admins surfed the web from their backup catalog servers and then lost them to an encryption attack. Yep, they lost their backup server catalog. How do you recover quickly from that? The next security concern is expanding attack vectors. As data needs of the organization grow, there are more opportunities for weak points in the chain. This complexity and increasing diversity of workloads and remote users to protect also creates challenges with visibility into what is happening in the backup landscape. Sometimes leaving your team digging for answers in a time-sensitive recovery scenario just because of the complexity. I don't believe there can be a single organization out there who are fully protected, and the bigger they grow, the more likely they are leaving holes for exploitation. The third threat pillar is simple human error, which accounts for 85% of the causes of data breaches. This includes accidental deletions, weak passwords, and vulnerability to social engineering attacks. Another area of human error is lack of information or misinformation, such as assuming that your cloud provider is protecting your data or inflated expectations of the role that snapshots should play in your recovery strategy. So we sometimes see a vulnerability can be the gap in awareness or strategy of the capabilities of the deployed products in an environment. Increasing complexity of environments, a shortage of critical IT skills, along with application, device, and remote mobile worker sprawl, all contribute to the fatigue, the distraction, and work challenges that lead to these costly human errors. As a result of these factors, managing the backup environment and the associated spend involved is often pushed to a very low priority. Of course, once a recovery is required, the backup solution is suddenly the most critical application in the IT environment. But is it ready and capable of the big recovery after being starved of human and capital resources? According to Verizon's 2021 Data Breach Investigations Report, 85% of data breaches are caused by human error. You know this, and you're dealing with it. Protecting your data from bad actors is painful, complicated, and it gets harder every day. We've covered the threats at a very high level, so what should organizations be looking for from their backup technology to help counter these threats? First, immutability. Immutability is a key buzzword in backup vendors these days, but let's check on what it actually means and whether it's enough. The Collins English Dictionary states something that is immutable will never change or cannot be changed. So backup data must be safe from mutation or changes. That means write once, read many, or worm must be implemented. The definition of immutable doesn't say anything about data being deleted, so make sure you check with your vendor if data can be deleted. The best practice, of course, is that data cannot be deleted except for the natural retention policy allowing it. Then role-based access control must also be used to prevent anyone changing that retention cycle without good reason. However, simple immutability probably isn't enough. Removing human errors and bad actors from your backup environment is the true next step you need to take, followed by containment by design, along with encryption, which renders protected data inert. Logical air gaps are required between sites, ensuring that infected data in one site cannot cross to another site. Attempts to break into your backup environment must be rejected and logged and available for analytics. A retail distributor customer of Cobalt Iron suffered an attack recently. It started in production and very quickly then focused on backup data and shredded it. This was before they were a Cobalt Iron customer. Everything had to be rebuilt, and as a result, when they looked around for a new solution before choosing Cobalt Iron, immutability was a mandatory requirement for them. Storage immutability is being added as a feature by backup vendors because customers don't have trust in the security of their own backup landscape. Security teams aren't assured that ransomware attacks will spread from production to the backup landscape and delete data. All of these immutability features should be built into an audit framework for security, state, and data validation, probably operating daily. Looking away from immutability, automated analysis and reporting is a critical requirement. When we look at ransomware, we need to consider the threat of data exfiltration and the following extortion. Backup software is not designed to prevent ransomware attacks or to clean up production data when it's infected, but backup software can greatly assist in spotting ransomware attacks happening and so minimize the threat. The next generation of backup solutions offers far more than just immutability. Backups must be able to automatically raise alerts and report on changing patterns in the backup data. Security for your primary systems is not perfect, so you should be using your backup solution to be the last line of defense for those systems. Backup solutions can be used to monitor the data being protected for changes in file names, changes in size, patterns of changes within or across folders, but some of them are extraordinarily slow, and one of them sends your backup data to the cloud for analysis. You need something that can analyze automatically and as close to real time as possible. There's no point waiting for your data to be moved somewhere else, maybe even deduplicated and rehydrated as well. You need to scan it as close to real time as possible. Backup solutions can now also automatically recover servers and run antivirus tests across the recoveries. If your backup solution isn't doing this, are you protecting your company enough? You simply cannot rely on humans to spot anomalous behavior by poring through all the data a backup solution creates, or can create, but the humans involved don't bother. This task should be passed to the automated systems which can detect at finer detail and at a speed while the backups are happening, normally overnight. Waiting for a human to analyze when they come in, or more likely at some later point when they have time, is waiting too long. Next, let's look at how organizations can start to separate their backup environment, replication target, and even recovery environment into separate zones and isolate them. Using isolated zones of cyber protection and recovery creates multiple secured perimeters within the backup infrastructure, which would otherwise include multiple products, integrations, data stores, and processes. This is minimizing exposure to malicious attacks. It creates as few paths as possible for an attacker to get into the solution and into your data. Backups should be encrypted and stored in a data protection zone, which provides isolation and inaccessibility from the production zone. Second copies of your backup data should then be moved into a shielded vault zone off-site. This zone provides a logical air gap from the production zone. An additional operational recovery zone can also be established to recover and validate data integrity in a safe and clean environment prior to restoring back into production. The Compass operational air gap that you see on the chart uses only certificate-based communications between the zones, time domain and operational control separation from the previous environment, and being able to control this from our automated and external analysis engine. That's our SAS brain, if you like. Other vendors will talk about similar air gaps, which are much more simple and involve a simple request to turn on or off the air gap. So each zone here on the chart is separate from the other zones. In the very unlikely event of ransomware being able to enter one zone, the ability to enter other zones is prevented. As organizations grow their backup infrastructure, they add more components in terms of hardware and software, and that adds more vulnerabilities. The risk of expanding attack vectors is dissolved with zero direct access to the backup infrastructure. Let's explore some more. Zero direct access means you have data immutability at every point, not just storage immutability as we touched on earlier. So what do we mean by this? Well, first of all, take a look at any backup landscape. Any of the components, any of the surfaces, any of the seams can be changed. There's a serious lack of control over access and passwords. We've all seen passwords on post-it notes attached to monitors. I myself have been given admin credentials when carrying out software installations in environments that would shock you. Let's talk about access control. You've probably heard of zero trust. Have you researched what it means? Essentially, it means that every access request should be checked and validated, and it doesn't prevent the use of valid credentials. With Compass, we talk about zero direct access to the policy managed data, as we covered earlier. No one can log in and delete the data. There simply isn't a method provided to do that. Only the retention policy can allow the backup data to be deleted, and no one can change the retention policy without passing through role-based access control. Next, zero logins to the compute or storage resources. That's right, no human access at all to the backup server or to the backup storage. No access to the database, no access to the backup networking. This is all possible, and it does exist today in our Compass solution. Let automation take care of those resources for you, freeing up valuable human resource time. Automated rejection and logging of unauthorized traffic, a pre-built and self-managing compute environment that can only talk to itself and its cloud-based controllers. Compass doesn't just reject the unauthorized traffic though, it drops it into a black hole so there is no reply or trace of what happened. Customers are then alerted about the attempt. Create security policies and use pre-validated identity controls. In a nutshell, use a technology that offers robust controls through role-based access. And next, an audit framework's required. You need to track everything that happens and have reporting capabilities. Compass carries out a sweep of the backup infrastructure every day to ensure the security posture is still 100%. Typical threats related to human error are erased by an analytics-driven autonomous framework. That's quite a mouthful, but what does it mean? Some of our customers are backing up data in the region of hundreds of petabytes of production data, or to put it another way, millions of objects per day. It's simply impossible for humans to carry out any kind of meaningful analysis and reporting with this volume of data. Also consider the time lag that occurs after analysis finds issues and before humans have time to react or react accordingly correctly. Analytics-driven security automation starts to help by looking for patterns in the backup data that indicates the results of changes by ransomware. It also means being able to automatically identify previous versions that can be safely recovered. Imagine coming into work and finding out there's ransomware in your production system, but don't worry, the legwork is done. You just need to recover this copy from this time. Analytics-driven automation assures data integrity for confident recovery. I hear so many stories from prospects about how they don't test their recovery plans well enough, or at all. This is always down to lack of human resources. So automate it. Let the software handle looking for distortion patterns, finding viable recovery versions, beginning to end encryption, and auditing the storage at rest for corruptions. Humans are also probably the biggest cause of devastating incidents in data centers outside of ransomware. Unintended accidents happen frequently during changes to the infrastructure. Compass automation helps in so many other ways to ensure a healthy backup solution. For example, analytics-driven automation also means using automation to let the software do the work that doesn't need to be done and cannot be done to such a fine scale by humans. This doesn't just mean automate the analysis and reporting, it means automate everything. I'm talking about things like updating the software components, the agents, the security, the backup software, the database, the storage software, all automatically. Thorough testing before software is rolled out to our customers ensures any updates will work. Our customers are using a mix of only 5 different sets of hardware, all regulated and maintained by Colbert Iron. Keeping our customers on the latest release ensures security updates are always current. Role-based access controls are a critical tool to control who has access to your backup solution and the various tools and capabilities within it. Many backup solutions feature role-based access controls, but how many organizations actually use it properly? Role-based access control is at the very core of your backup security. The first step anyone should take when setting up a backup solution is controlling exactly who can log in. The second step is controlling who has the privilege of changing the policies that control a backup job for each environment. Keep a tight grip on who has admin rights. It should be a small group of people involved in backup decisions. Everyone else should have rights to handle the data they're responsible for. The Oracle DBAs don't need to know that VMware backups are taking place and certainly shouldn't have any ability to change things. Following this advice allows a core group of backup decision makers to create the policies that all the other teams will have to use to control their backups. Finally, give viewing rights to the occasional visitors, maybe the CIO or infrastructure director, maybe first or second line support so they can see incidents but not respond to them directly. So these are your hows, and if you only remember one slide today, here it is. Immutability. Stop your backup data from being changed and also prevent it from being deleted. Use automation to make your life easier. Most organizations neglect their backup solutions and capabilities because it's too onerous on time. Stop the hacker access to your backup data before it's even a thought with completely isolated zones of cyber protection and recovery that protect not just the data, but all of the components in the infrastructure. Remove the risk of expanding attack vectors in an increasingly complex data landscape with zero direct access. Drive out the threats and time and resource costs of human error by letting the software do the majority of the work for you via a constantly self-healing and optimizing analytics-driven autonomous framework in your backup. Implement in-depth role-based access controls to prevent people who shouldn't make changes from making changes. Put these best practices into place and give yourself the confidence to respond in the worst case scenario. Which brings us back to a story. What do you do when you've been attacked and you need to act fast? I can share with you today what our customer, a global manufacturer, was able to achieve and what they did when they were faced with this scenario, and literally the production lines had to stop so they could figure out the problem. For the protection of the organization involved, no actual names will be used, and to prevent you wasting your time looking for this, I can tell you that they were able to keep this breach out of the news and want to keep it that way, as you can imagine. However, we do want to provide some background context for the discussion. This customer uses Cobalt Iron's Compass solution to protect their data. This is a large enterprise company that you've heard of, with locations in dozens of countries. They have hundreds of locations and thousands of employees. The backup landscape is protecting several petabytes of data. I'm not going to gloss over the messy details. We all know the difference between an ideal scenario and what actually happens on the floor. Hopefully, some of the lessons learned in this customer story will help you in your disaster recovery planning. In this customer's case, the cyber attack was first detected when several production servers became unavailable to users at about the same time as Cobalt Iron's support team were notified of anomalies in the backups by our automated detection systems. The IT staff launched into action to determine the cause. The first step was analyzing the scope of infection. In short order, the company received a ransom demand from the hackers. From early indications, the company IT staff suspected that Active Directory was the initial target. Once the hackers gained access to user IDs and passwords, the attack started to spread. At that time, Active Directory was encrypted and disallowing logins, and the focus shift to getting back on track and restored. Compass cyber event notifications were automatically generated to assess the scope and impact of the attack. These reports included details of specific systems and files that might have been infected, the ransomware patterns that hit each object, a suggested recovery time based on analysis, and a recommended system and file restore list. This impact analysis confirmed it was an Active Directory and Windows-focused attack and further indicated the attack was regionalized to North America. As you might imagine, having this precise and accurate impact analysis, as well as specific recommendations for recovery, were of tremendous value to the customer in these moments. Armed with this impact analysis information, a number of operational actions were quickly set in motion. First, replication operations for around 1,200 Windows systems in North America were turned off to ensure bad data wasn't replicated further. Next, expiration processing for all those systems was also stopped to avoid expiring any good backups. Enforced password changes for all these systems were initiated. In addition, backup schedules for all possible infected systems were deferred until validated recoveries could be performed. Unfortunately for this company, that's not the end of the story. As is common, hackers will hit you when you're down and distracted with a second attack. 3 weeks after the initial breach, they found themselves once again under attack. Like the first attack, servers became unavailable. The IT staff jumped into action to shut down the attack and protect unaffected systems. Again, the hackers demanded that the company pay a sizable ransom. A second impact analysis showed that approximately 1,000 Windows servers in North America had been impacted. With this data in hand, backup schedules were again deferred by platform and region to avoid ingesting infected data into the backup. Immediate modifications were also made to stop replication and expiration to protect the existing backup files. This change was applied to about 1,000 servers. Again, using backup activity reports and cyber event notifications, the approximate time of the attack was determined and recovery points established much more quickly than if the team had to dig to manually find these potential recovery points. You can see on this slide that a suggested recovery point in time has automatically been suggested, using evidence of which files were changed. Compass backup event reports were used throughout the restore process to provide visibility on how many restores had been processed and how long restores were taking. Once again, all impacted systems were restored with no data loss and no ransom being paid. Finally, a summary of the experience. Once the attack was detected, they were able to use the Compass data to fully understand the impact and scope of the attack and take immediate operational actions to lock down their primary data. They recovered to a clean backup without paying any ransom. And when a second attack from the same source occurred, they were ready and confident in their ability to recover. As you might imagine, the hacker had expected a payday by now and was pretty angry that the company had ignored the ransom demand twice. Several weeks later, the hacker declared, "I'm going to target your backup servers. I'm going to delete your backup data." By this time, they had confidence and didn't feel the need to follow up by paying the ransom. No successful attack events took place against the Compass backup infrastructure. The results, full recovery, everything was restored. This was because the customer was able to call on some of the technologies we've talked about. Firstly, Immutability ensured that the backup data was secure. Second, automated analysis and reporting of the changes enabled the customer to quickly identify where the attack was and what could be recovered safely. Third, the customer was assured by having another copy of data safely isolated in their DR site. And finally, zero direct access to the backup environment prevented access to the backup solution or data, even though Active Directory was compromised. Because Active Directory was not used to access the backup solution, it was ready to carry out restores immediately. The initial fear of a worst-case scenario transformed into confidence over that series of weeks. The most important outcomes for this customer were that all systems were restored, no data was lost, no ransom was paid, and there was no impact on the company's customers. This company likely saved millions of dollars and protected their reputation. To this day, this attack has not needed to be communicated to the market. The team was fully enabled to recover from a ransomware attack disaster. During the course of the attacks, they executed some 23,000 recoveries. This included virtual machines, file spaces, and applications. They now know they can fight the battle and win with Compass and are not at the mercy of ransomware attackers. Our customer did learn a lot by going through the recovery process twice. They were able to iron out some fairly important wrinkles in their recovery processes. When was the last time you carried out a full-scale disaster recovery against the clock? Perhaps it's time to test your readiness properly. So these are your hows, and if you only remember one slide today, here it is. Immutability prevents your data changing. Automated analysis and reporting gives you information that no human could ever produce. Stop the hacker access to your backup data before it's even a thought with completely isolated zones of cyber protection and recovery that protect not just the data, but all of the components in the infrastructure. Remove the risk of expanding attack vectors in an increasingly complex data landscape with zero direct access. And drive out the threats and time and resource costs of human error by letting the software do the majority of the work for you via a constantly self-healing and optimizing analytics-driven autonomous framework in your backups. But put these best practices into place and give yourself the confidence to respond in the worst-case scenario. All of these features are available as standard in Cobalt Iron Compass. If you aren't using these features, why are you compromising on the security of your backup solution? I hope you've all enjoyed today's session and learned some new and important information. My email's on the slide. Please feel free to contact me with any questions you might have. Our website's up there as well. There's lots of information there. So now time to say thank you very much for your attention and commitment to continuing to learn about new strategies to protect your company and customers.
Chris, thank you so much for taking us through the growing cyber threats, the key data protection technologies, and the customer cyber attack case study. You've certainly given all of us a lot to think about. I would like to thank everyone again for joining today's presentation, and I invite you to visit our website at www.cobaltiron.com to not only learn more about Cobalt Iron Compass, but you can also find a link to our free data protection assessment benchmark tool to see where you fall against your peers in terms of what you're doing for data protection. It'll provide a custom report that you can utilize to improve your data protection. And with that, I will thank you very much and say, have a great day.
Thank you, Mary.